Today, everything will be kicked off by a bishop named Gene Robinson.
President Obama surprised Bishop Gene Robinson, the country's first openly Episcopal bishop, and asked him to come deliver the event's closing prayer.
In our country, we will have our morals. We will protect our children. And we are making this law. We are making this law for ourselves. We are making this law for our children. We are making this law for the children of our children. This country will stand firm. And once it passed, I can tell you, Madam Speaker, we are going to reinforce the law enforcement officers to make sure that homosexuals have no space in Uganda.
Ugandan lawmakers recently passed a bill that criminalizes LGBT behavior, and the elites in the United States believe it is their job to chastise Uganda for doing this.
Bishop Gene Robinson is a self-proclaimed alcoholic who abandoned his wife for another lover. Why, then, you ask, would he be brought in to kick off the ceremonies beginning today? I'll tell you why. Because he is the first openly homosexual man to be named a bishop by the Episcopal Church. It's the only reason that we know Gene Robinson's name. He is absolutely disqualified biblically from being a pastor. Absolutely disqualified biblically.
We have grave concerns with the passage of the Anti-Homosexuality Act, AHA, by the Parliament of Uganda yesterday, and increasing violence targeting LGBT+ persons. If the AHA is signed into law and enacted, it would impinge upon universal human rights, jeopardize progress in the fight against HIV/AIDS, deter tourism and invest in Uganda, and damage Uganda's international reputation. The bill is one of the most extreme anti-LGBTI+ laws in the world. Human rights are universal. No one should be attacked, imprisoned, or killed simply because of who they are or whom they love.
This is the Parliament passing it. It still has some process to go here. We're certainly watching this real closely, and we would have to take a look at whether or not there might be repercussions that we would have to take, perhaps in an economic way, should this law actually get passed and enacted. That would be really unfortunate, because so much of the economic assistance that we provide Uganda is health assistance, and largely through PEPFAR. You can see a world in which, a law like this, should it be enacted, would not only, as Karine rightly said, just be devastating to a whole community of people inside Uganda, but if it were to have any kind of an effect on our economic assistance, that would only make that worse. So we'll have to take a look. No decisions.
We talked last week about the judgment of God. This awesome and terrible judgment of God being poured out on Sodom and Gomorrah as a reminder for all people of all times about the holiness of God and about the righteousness of God. How do we then come to a place where we so openly and so readily accept this abomination?
There's a stark divide between Western cultures and these African nations that want to protect their culture and children from the devastating effects of the LGBT agenda, which has essentially taken hostage the entirety of Western civilization and culture.
Mr. President, this is my 221st day of publicly transitioning.
God love it.
I want to begin by taking a moment to condemn in the absolute strongest terms the despicable law put forward by the Ugandan government discriminating against the 2SL+ community. This is something that Canada totally and completely stands against. We will be looking at how we can support the community in Uganda as we continue to stand for 2SL+ rights in Canada and around the world.
Are you in favor of changing the Constitution on that issue?
No,
it's never a priority in Zimbabwe to deal with that issue.
I venture to disagree with you, Mr. President.
That's democratic.
Surely you keep Zimbabwe in a different age. Never mind same-sex marriage, but in an age when the European Union, the United States, Australia recently enacted same-sex marriage, and pretty much your country is in a very small minority.
Are Western governments, represented by leaders such as Joe Biden and Justin Trudeau, or these African governments that treat homosexuality as evil, closer to God's moral law as revealed in Scripture?
Because as I will demonstrate for you, it is not the consensus among most Christians that Genesis chapter 19, either number 1, is a direct issue of open and blatant sodomy.
But it's not just Western governments and culture. Even many within the Christian church are making these kinds of arguments.
They try to subvert the text and they say, no. The sin in Sodom and Gomorrah is not really about that sin. We don't have such a stern pronouncement against what they would refer to as loving monogamous relationships. The individuals whose voices are heard the loudest are individuals who are identified as being inside the church, not outside the church.
Again, let's contrast the West's view of homosexuality with what the majority of people in Africa believe.
When a government gets in the habit of treating people differently, those habits can spread and not harming anybody. The idea that they are going to be treated differently or abused because of who they love is wrong. Full stop.
Just like President Obama, I think we also need to be able to speak frankly about some of these things. And the fact of the matter is that Kenya and the United States, we share so many values. Our common love for democracy, entrepreneurship, value for families. These are things that we share. But there are some things that we must admit we don't share. Our culture, our societies don't accept. It's very difficult for us to be able to impose on people that which they themselves do not accept. This is why I repeatedly say that for Kenyans today, the issue of rights is really a non-issue.
What is your message to Western human rights groups, to President Obama,
respect,
to lesbian, bisexual, and trans people?
Respect African societies and their values. If you don't agree, you just keep quiet. Let's manage our society the way we see. If we are wrong, we shall find out by ourselves. Just the way we don't interfere with yours.
What's shocking is that there are so many, even within the Christian church, who are unwilling to take any kind of strong stance against homosexuality.
Brian McClaren, well-known name. Brian McClaren is a leader of the emergent/emerging church/conversation. Again, he's talking about homosexuality here. They'll be admittedly provisional. We'll keep our ears attuned to scholars in biblical studies, theology, ethics, psychology, genetics, sociology, and related fields. Then in 5 years, if we have clarity, we'll speak. If not, we'll set another 5 years for ongoing reflection. After all, many important issues in church history took centuries to figure out. Maybe this moratorium would help us resist the winds of doctrine blowing furiously from the left and the right, so that we can patiently wait for the wind of the Spirit to set our course. That's where we are. That's where we are.
Here's Vice President Kamala Harris trying to tell the people of Ghana what to do.
At the same time, the Biden administration committed to calling out any foreign government that advanced anti-gay legislation or violates human rights. All three of the countries that you are visiting on this trip have advanced or proposed anti-gay legislation. Ghana has proposed a bill that would imprison those that engage in same-sex intercourse. Sex remains a crime in Tanzania, and same-sex relationships are outlawed in Zambia. What have you said to the president and plan to say to other leaders on this trip about this crackdown on human rights?
I'll start. I have raised this issue, and let me be clear about where we stand. First of all, for the American press who are here, you know that a great deal of work in my career has been to address human rights issues, equality issues across the board, including as it relates to the LGBT community. And I feel very strongly about the importance of supporting the freedom and supporting and fighting for equality among all people, and that all people be treated equally. I will also say that this is an issue that we consider, and I consider, to be a human rights issue, and that will not change.
Now listen to a Ghana lawmaker respond to what Harris said.
As the vice president just did, is it yesterday? I mean, these things should not be tolerated. That is undemocratic. What is democracy? That somebody else will have to dictate to me as to what is good and what is bad? Unheard of. Because we have decided to devalue ourselves and go a-begging. Come on, we have more than enough. God has created more than enough for every person. It's just because you are looking at somebody else's share, not yours. We have enough in the world. The bill will be passed. This is the word to His Excellency the President. There is no way he can intervene. That answer he gave. That is now before Parliament. And when he gets to a stage that he will come in. Hey, please. This is legislation. This is not execution. Wait until we pass it and then we direct you to execute it. That is when you come in. That is why we are representatives of the people. So in terms of law, which is part of policy, we finalize it. And then the executive now have the authority to implement it, to execute it. Let's get this clear. Once this bill is before here, he is not in charge. I am in charge. I hope the U.S. Vice President is not yet gone, but she will read from me.
It's sad that the West, including many Christians in the West, think that they are morally superior to these African nations because they do not view homosexuality as a dangerous sin that can destroy children and countless lives, which it has clearly done already in the West.
Our children don't have to walk with people who live in the gutter to know that they shouldn't live in the gutter, that there are graphic and vile things out there that they should flee from and, in fact, shouldn't even open their minds to. That's the way we should act towards sin. So don't you ever apologize for sheltering your children.
Here's another African lawmaker telling the West to stop trying to control what African nations believe is best for them.
If we allow them to take over our lives, we have allowed them for far too long for them to exploit us and to dehumanize us as human beings. On this, we will say no. If they're going to come up with the travel, what they call restrictions, keep your country, keep your cultures, keep your nonsense to yourselves. And I'm talking to the West in this case here.
But of course, the West can't help but continue to try to impose itself upon these African nations because it believes it is morally superior and has been enlightened about the truth concerning LGBT. Here's someone from CNN trying to impose her moral values on the president of Kenya.
So, I think you're going to get yourself into trouble because what you've categorically just stated is that this is not an issue for us, for the Kenyan people, and you don't think that the idea of their privacy, their equality, their rights is important.
This is,
but it's a global issue right now.
Again, the divide between Western cultures and African cultures is truly vast. And we as Christians need to be able to critically evaluate just how far Western culture has fallen regarding these kinds of sins.
We're not just talking about a lot of people. We're not just talking about it becoming culturally acceptable. We're talking about this having infected everyone in the culture except Lot. That's what we're talking about here. It was everywhere. It was everywhere. And that just tells me things can and probably will get worse. Amen? It's never been this bad. Never before, never since was it this bad. Things can get worse.
And as Christians, we need to not be tricked into minimizing or excusing what the Bible clearly calls heinous sin.
Here's another thing that I want you to note. Virtually everywhere in the New Testament where you read these words about homosexuality, sexual immorality is right there with it. It's grievous. It's heinous. And it is absolutely accepted in our culture.
And as Christians, we need to be bold in proclaiming the truth in the midst of a wicked culture that has raised its fist against both God and Christians.
I'm afraid for us. Not afraid for me. I know where I'm going. But I'm afraid for us. I love my brothers and sisters. My fellow Americans, absolutely love them. And because of that, I'll continue to preach this truth, regardless of what it costs. Because what we desperately need is not to become more tolerant of what God calls wicked. But what we desperately need is a word from the Lord and individuals who will, without compromise and without venom, proclaim that truth in the gospel, which is the only answer.
Hi, my name is Mike. I'm a deacon, a husband, a father, a software engineer, and an amateur maker of videos. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help me in my mission to spread biblical truth, just subscribe and watch these videos until the end, which will help the YouTube algorithm recommend these videos to more people. I'm committed to using the skills and gifts God has given me to glorify Him and communicate biblical truth. And I would be so grateful if you would come be a part of what I'm building. You can visit my website at joyfulexile.com to learn more about me and what I'm working on. I hope you're having a blessed day. I will see you in the next video, and remember, this world is not our home.